When the neighborhood association imprisoned his ranch and bolted the entrance, most people anticipated his surrender. Instead, a rancher reversed the situation with a single maneuver they never foretold. Mr. Alex Turner had witnessed storms demolish fences before, but never one quite like this. This one wasn't constructed from wood or wire. It was fashioned from regulations, hubris, and a heavy padlock he didn't own. One morning in early March, just as the sun illuminated the rolling pastures outside Phoenix, he walked out with a mug of coffee and froze. A brand new, gleaming perimeter fence stretched across his property line. It wasn't his. It wasn't even on his land. And at the center of it, the only way in or out, was a steel gate with a hefty lock and a sign. Property access managed by the Lakeside Meadows Neighborhood Association. He set his mug down on the porch railing, staring. His livestock grazed inside, but now they were confined like animals in a zoo. The old access road, the one that led to the county highway, was on the other side of that gate. The only key belonged to the Neighborhood Association president, Miss Helen Vance, a woman with sharp suits, sharper heels, and an even sharper reputation in the community. Alex had moved here just 6 weeks earlier, leaving behind the traffic and noise of Houston. He was 46 years old with calloused hands and a back that still ached from the last harvest season. He'd saved for years to purchase this expanse. He'd envisioned tranquil mornings, the consistent rhythm of ranch work, and the sound of cattle lowing against the wind. He hadn't accounted for a neighborhood association, let alone one that would literally fence him in. By the time he reached the gate, 2 men in association polo shirts were tightening the bolts. "Morning," Alex called, trying to keep his tone even. "Do you mind telling me what this is?" One of them didn't look up. The other muttered, "Speak to the board." And then he saw her, Helen Vance, pulling up in a flawless silver SUV. She stepped out, sunglasses perched high, clipboard under her arm. "Mr. Turner," she said without so much as a greeting, "you've been notified of your non-compliance issues." Alex frowned. "Non-compliance with what?" "Perimeter fencing must align with community standards," she replied briskly. "Yours does not. Until it's corrected, this measure will prevent further violations." "This measure?" Alex gestured toward the cattle milling near the fence. "That's my access road. My animals require water from the creek down there. And that," he pointed, "isn't your land." Helen's smile was thin. "The access easement is controlled by the association, Mr. Turner. It's in the covenant you agreed to when you acquired the property." Alex felt his stomach tighten. He recalled the stack of papers he'd signed at closing, pages of legal language no one but a lawyer could love. "You mean to tell me you can just lock me in until I comply?" she said simply, turning toward her SUV. "Contact our office when you're prepared to discuss the approved fencing style. Have a pleasant day." The gate clanged shut, the lock clicked, and she drove off. The 2 workers finished their task and left without another word. Alex stood there for a long moment, hands on his hips, the morning breeze tugging at his shirt. He'd faced stubborn cattle, drought, and rising feed prices, but never someone so determined to make a point. That night, he sat at the kitchen table with his neighbor, Mr. Glenn Porter, a retired trucker who'd lived here for 20 years. "They've been doing this for a while," Glenn said, sipping his coffee. "Helen's got the board wrapped around her finger. If she doesn't like you, she'll make your life miserable." Alex shook his head. "I didn't move out here to get pushed around by a committee." "Then you better be ready for a fight," Glenn replied. "She won't back down, and she sure as heck won't give you that key unless you play her game." Alex leaned back, staring at the ceiling. He wasn't sure yet how far this would go, but something in him refused to give in. The land wasn't just dirt and grass. It was his dream, his work, and his future. The next morning, he drove into town, bought a thick file folder, and started collecting every letter, every photo, and every scrap of paper related to the property. If Helen wanted a fight, she'd get one, but he had no idea just how personal and how public it was about to become. 2 days later, Alex found himself walking into the Lakeside Meadows clubhouse for his first official neighborhood association meeting. The place smelled faintly of fresh coffee and old carpet, and every seat in the small conference room was taken. A half-dozen board members sat behind a long folding table, papers stacked in front of them. At the center, wearing a tailored navy blazer and a necklace that looked like it cost more than his first truck, sat Helen Vance. Her eyes followed him as he took a seat in the back. "Mr. Turner," she said into the microphone before the meeting even started. "You'll be on the agenda under compliance matters." The first 40 minutes were a blur of talk about landscaping, pool hours, and a dispute over someone's mailbox color. Alex kept his focus on the packet they'd given him. Page after page listed rules about exterior paint, driveway length, even acceptable lawn ornaments. When his name was finally called, he walked to the front, the sound of his boots echoing in the otherwise still room. "Let's talk about that fence you built," Helen began. Alex took a slow breath. "It's the same one I've had for years on my previous property. It's functional, safe, and keeps my cattle in." "Functional isn't the standard here," she replied smoothly. "Community aesthetics are. Perimeter fencing must be uniform, and yours does not meet approved specifications." Alex set his folder on the table and opened it. "This is a cattle ranch, not a golf course. My fencing is made for livestock, not to look pretty from the road." A man at the far end of the table cleared his throat. "Rules are rules, sir. We can't make exceptions. If we did it for you, we'd have to do it for everyone." Alex met his eyes. "You already do make exceptions. I drove past 3 houses on my street with different fencing styles. None of them match yours, and none of them have a padlock on their gate." A few people in the audience shifted in their seats. Helen's lips tightened. "Those cases are under review," she said quickly. "In the meantime, you remain out of compliance. The fines will continue until the fencing is corrected." Alex leaned forward slightly. "How about the fact that your fence is blocking access to my water source? You're interfering with my ability to care for my animals. That's not just wrong, it's dangerous." "You have other water sources," she replied. "We confirmed it with satellite imagery." Alex let out a short, humorless laugh. "Imagery? You think you can tell from a photo how I operate my ranch?" A murmur rippled through the room. Glenn Porter, sitting in the second row, raised his hand. "Helen, the man's been here barely 2 months. Maybe we give him time to adjust before hitting him with a locked gate and fines." Helen didn't even glance at him. "The association has to maintain standards, Mr. Porter. If Mr. Turner wants to be part of this community, he must follow the same rules as everyone else." Alex picked up his folder. "And if I don't?" Her voice stayed calm, but her eyes were sharp. "Then we continue with fines, and, if necessary, legal action." He walked back to his seat without another word, though inside his frustration was boiling. After the meeting, several neighbors came up to him. Some whispered quick words of support before glancing nervously toward Helen. Others avoided eye contact altogether. It was clear she had influence here, maybe more than the title of president alone explained. Outside in the parking lot, Glenn caught up to him. "She's not just strict," he said in a low voice. "She's got friends on the county zoning board and a cousin in real estate. People think twice before crossing her." Alex looked back at the clubhouse. Through the glass doors, he could see Helen shaking hands with a tall man in a suit, both of them smiling like they just won a prize. "I'm not playing her game," Alex said finally. "If she wants to turn this into a battle, I'll bring one she's not ready for." But he didn't yet realize the lengths Helen would go to keep her control, and how much the fight would cost. Both of them. By the next week, Alex's mailbox was starting to look like a courthouse filing cabinet. Each day brought a fresh envelope stamped with Association Compliance Office across the front. Inside were notices, each one more aggressive than the last. The fines started at $50 a day, then jumped to $100. They claimed his fence posed a visual inconsistency detrimental to community appeal. Alex read the words out loud in his kitchen, shaking his head. "Visual inconsistency? I'm raising cattle, not hosting weddings." Glenn was sitting across the table, sipping black coffee. "They know exactly what they're doing," he said. They keep piling it on so you either fold or start bleeding money. That evening, Alex decided to attend the next association meeting not to argue, but to listen. He figured the more he understood their tactics, the better his chances of finding a weak spot. The clubhouse was packed again, this time with a strange tension in the air. A woman Alex hadn't met before, Ms. Paula Green, stood at the front complaining about a tree the association had forced her to cut down. She glanced at Alex mid-sentence, then quickly looked away. When the meeting moved to new compliance matters, Helen glanced at him but didn't call his name. Instead, she rattled off a list of other infractions. An RV parked too long in a driveway, a shed painted an unapproved color, someone's porch light that was too bright. Alex watched carefully. The tone was always the same: cold, efficient, and backed by the threat of escalation. Afterward in the parking lot, Paula walked up to him. "You're Turner, right? The rancher with the fence issue." "That's me," Alex said. "They're going to wear you down until you either give up or move out," she warned. "Helen's been doing this for years. She doesn't care who you are. She cares about winning." Alex studied her face. Why do people let her keep winning? Paula's answer was quiet. Because most folks don't want trouble. And Helen knows how to make trouble feel expensive. The conversation stayed with him. He realized the association wasn't just enforcing rules. It was building a culture where fear kept everyone in line. And now, by refusing to bow, he was drawing a line of his own. The next day, Alex called the association office. "I'm requesting mediation," he told the woman who answered. "I want to sit down with the board and work out a compromise." When the mediation day came, he walked into the room with photographs of his cattle, maps of the property, and documentation of every conversation so far. Helen sat across the table, flipping through a thin binder as if she already knew the outcome. "Mr. Turner," the mediator began, "the association is willing to waive some of the fines if you agree to replace your fence within 60 days. Alex shook his head. "That's not a compromise. That's just your original demand with a discount." Helen interjected. "We're being generous here, Mr. Turner. Most people don't get this kind of consideration." Alex leaned forward. "Most people don't have their animals trapped behind a locked gate either. This isn't just about a fence. It's about my livelihood, and you're standing in the way of it." The mediator shifted uncomfortably. "Let's focus on the practical options." "The practical option," Alex cut in, "is you give me back access to my own road and stop pretending you're doing me a favor." Helen's smile didn't reach her eyes. "We'll be in touch," she said, standing to leave. The meeting ended without resolution. That night, Alex sat on his porch long after the sun had gone down, listening to the distant calls of his cattle. The line had been drawn, and neither side was going to cross it willingly. But he didn't know yet that the fight was about to shift from quiet paperwork to something far more public and far more dangerous. The real breaking point came on a windy Thursday morning. Alex had been up since dawn fixing a trough pump near the north pasture. As he walked toward the creek, he noticed his cattle clustered near the new perimeter fence, restless and pacing. He followed their gaze and saw the problem. The creek was now completely inaccessible. The new fencing didn't just block the road. It cut off the only reliable water source on that side of the property. He dropped his gloves on the ground and climbed over the fence, his boots thudding against the packed dirt. On the other side, the locked gate stood like a challenge in front of him, the thick steel shackle gleaming in the morning light. He rattled it hard, the sound echoing across the pasture. No movement, no one to answer. By mid-morning, he was on the phone with the association office again. "I need access to that creek immediately," he told the receptionist. "My cattle can't be cut off from water. This is basic animal welfare." Her tone was clipped. "Mr. Turner, the association has confirmed there are other water points on your property. Those tanks are for backup," he snapped. "If we hit a heat wave, they won't last a week. Do you want to be responsible for dead cattle?" "I can forward your concern to the board," she replied, clearly uninterested. "But I can't authorize access." That afternoon, Alex drove straight to Helen's house. Her place was immaculate. Freshly painted siding, trimmed hedges, not a leaf out of place. She opened the door wearing a pale blue blouse, her expression polite but guarded. "This isn't about fines anymore," Alex said, keeping his voice steady. "It's about my animals. You're cutting them off from water." Helen's reply was smooth, almost rehearsed. "Mr. Turner, the association operates under a uniform standard. If we make exceptions, it undermines the integrity of the community." "The integrity of the community?" His voice rose. "You're talking about a fence. I'm talking about living creatures depending on me to keep them alive." Her expression didn't change. "The rules are the rules." Alex took a step back, clenching his fists to keep from saying something he'd regret. "This isn't over, Helen." As he walked away, he caught a glimpse of movement behind her curtains. Neighbors peeking out, watching. The fight was no longer just between him and the association president. It was a spectacle. 2 days later, the first signs of stress appeared in his herd. A few cattle stood near the fence, bellowing toward the creek. Alex brought in extra water tanks, but the process of hauling and refilling them was exhausting and expensive. Glenn came over to help one afternoon, leaning against the truck as they unloaded another tank. "She's playing hardball," Glenn said, "trying to wear you down until you give in." "She's not getting what she wants," Alex replied, pulling a wrench from the toolbox. "I'll keep hauling water if I have to, but I'm not rebuilding that fence just to match her idea of aesthetics." Still, the stress was building. By the end of the week, Alex was running on little sleep, juggling ranch work with constant letters and notices from the association. One envelope included a photo someone had taken it from the road showing one of his water tanks slightly tilted. The letter claimed it was a safety hazard and demanded its removal. "That's harassment," Glenn said after reading it. "That's Helen," Alex replied. And then one morning the situation shifted. A for sale sign appeared on the small half-acre lot that contained the locked gate. The land was technically separate from both his ranch and the association's main holdings. Alex stood there staring at the sign, the gears in his mind turning fast. If he owned that strip of land, he'd own the gate. And if he owned the gate, the lock would be his. But he knew if Helen caught wind of his plan, she'd find a way to stop it. So whatever he did next would have to be fast and quiet. Alex didn't rush straight to the real estate office. He knew better than to charge in without understanding the full picture. That afternoon, he drove into Phoenix and sat down with Mr. Tom Baird, a local attorney whose office smelled faintly of old paper and fresh coffee. Tom had the kind of handshake that told you he'd been in business a long time. Alex spread out the letters, photos, and the latest association notices on Tom's desk. "I want to know if what they're doing is even legal, and if I buy the land with that gate on it, does it give me full control?" Tom adjusted his glasses, scanning the documents. "They're operating inside the bounds of the covenants you signed when you bought the property," he said slowly. "That's the bad news. Those rules were baked into the purchase agreement, and they give the association more control than most folks realize." "And the good news?" Alex asked. Tom tapped the photo of the for sale sign. "If that parcel really is separate from association ownership, and it's got the only gate access to your property, then yes, you'd have every legal right to control it. But you'll need to verify that before making a move, and you'll need to make the purchase in a way that doesn't trigger alarm bells at the association office." Alex nodded. "Meaning Helen can't know it's me." "Exactly," Tom said. "If she catches wind, she could push the seller to accept a competing offer or find a way to rezone before the sale closes. You need to keep your name out of it entirely." For the next few days, Alex kept up his normal routine, as if nothing had changed. He fed the cattle, hauled water, waved at neighbors. But at night, he sat at his kitchen table drafting a plan. He contacted an old friend from college, Mr. Frank Lawson, who ran a property management company 2 counties over. Frank agreed to set up a limited liability company under his company's umbrella, giving Alex total privacy in the transaction. One evening, Glenn stopped by and found Alex studying a county plat map. "You're cooking something up," Glenn said with a grin. Alex didn't deny it. "If I told you, I'd have to make you swear it stays between us." Glenn raised a hand. "My lips are sealed." Alex explained the plan in low tones. By the time he finished, Glenn was grinning even wider. "That's bold," he said. "And I like it." Meanwhile, Helen seemed to sense something was shifting. She started showing up near the fence more often, sometimes with 2 other board members in tow. They'd stand by the gate, talking quietly, glancing in Alex's direction. One afternoon, as he was repairing a post near the main pasture, she walked over with her usual clipboard. "Mr. Turner," she said, "we've scheduled another compliance inspection for next week." Alex didn't look up from his work. "You can schedule all you want. My fence isn't changing." "You're only making things harder on yourself," she replied. He straightened and met her gaze. "And you're underestimating me." They stared at each other for a moment before she turned and walked back toward her SUV. The following morning, Alex's phone buzzed. Frank had called to say the seller accepted the limited liability company's initial offer. No counter, no questions asked. The closing date was set for just under 3 weeks away. Felt like the first real victory in months. But Tom warned him to keep his guard up. "The deal's not final until the ink's dry," he said. "Don't let your opponent know you're already holding the winning hand." Alex agreed. He knew Helen wouldn't stop until she was certain she'd won. The trick was to let her think she was still in control right up until the moment she wasn't. But keeping a secret in a small community is like holding water in your hands, and Alex was about to find out just how fast word could spread. 2 days after Frank's call, Alex drove past the lot with the gate, just to make sure the for sale sign was still planted in the ground. It was. A gust of wind had bent one corner, but otherwise nothing had changed. He parked down the road and sat for a while, watching. The property was small, just enough to hold the gate, a narrow gravel strip, and a thin line of mesquite trees along the back. But it was the choke point for everything beyond it. Whoever controlled the strip controlled every vehicle, every delivery, and every person entering his ranch. Alex knew the association would have been on it already if they'd had the funds or the legal claim to grab it. The fact that they hadn't meant there was a gap, one he could quietly slide through. That afternoon, Frank called again. Title search came back clean. No liens, no disputes. Sellers just looking to unload it quick. Probably doesn't even realize the leverage it gives. Alex smiled to himself. Good. Let's keep it that way. The next week, he kept a careful routine. No sudden visits to town, no unusual conversations with neighbors. If anyone asked about the fence situation, he just shrugged and said, "We'll see how it plays out." Inside, though, his mind was already running through what it would feel like to slide his own key into that padlock and turn it. One evening, Glenn came over with a cooler of beer and leaned against the porch railing. "You've been awfully quiet lately," he said. "That's either good news or you're planning something dangerous." Alex handed him a beer. "Let's just say I'm lining things up so I don't have to ask for permission anymore." Glenn grinned. "Now that sounds like the Alex I know." The hardest part was resisting the urge to tip his hand when he saw Helen twice that week. She drove past while Alex was out by the road. She gave her usual curt wave, more of a motion than a greeting, and he kept his face unreadable. But inside the association office, things were shifting. Paula Green, the neighbor who'd warned Alex about Helen's tactics, caught him in the grocery store one morning. "I heard the board's been sniffing around that gate lot," she said quietly, glancing around the aisle. "Don't know what they're planning, but they're talking to a surveyor." Alex kept his voice calm. "Appreciate the heads up." That night he called Frank. "We need to move faster. If they start bringing in surveyors, they could slow the sale or try to tie it up in court." Frank didn't hesitate. "I'll push the title company. We can get you in escrow by Friday." The days between felt like a slow boil. Alex went about his chores, but every creak of tires on gravel had him glancing toward the road. The thought of Helen swooping in at the last minute gnawed at him. On Friday morning, Frank called again. "It's done. Escrow's open. Deposits down. We're locked in unless you back out, and I know you're not backing out." Alex let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Let's get it closed as soon as possible." He didn't celebrate that night. Instead, he sat at the kitchen table, pen in hand, making a list of every scenario he could think of. Once he had the gate, There was no doubt in his mind that Helen would push back hard. She might call the sheriff, threaten lawsuits, even rally the board to write new rules. But none of that mattered if the legal ownership was his. Still, the victory wouldn't mean much if the association found another way to corner him. He'd need to be ready not just for the fight, but for the fallout. But even with all his planning, Alex couldn't predict how fast the tension would spike once the sale became public and how quickly lines in the community would be redrawn. The closing date landed on a gray Tuesday morning, the kind where the sky felt heavy but refused to give rain. Alex dressed like it was any other day. Worn jeans, boots dusty from the pasture, a plain button-up shirt. He drove into Phoenix without telling a soul, parking behind the title company's small brick office. Frank was already inside, sipping coffee and flipping through the paperwork. "Morning," Frank said with a grin. "Ready to make Helen's life a whole lot more complicated?" Alex smirked. "Let's get it done." The process was straightforward because the limited liability company was listed as the buyer. Alex's name never touched the official sale documents. Frank signed on behalf of the company, slid the papers across the desk, and within an hour, the deal was sealed. The keys, a single heavy silver set on a worn leather fob, sat in the center of the table. Frank pushed them toward Alex. "They're yours." Alex picked them up, turning the largest one in his hand. He could feel the weight of it, not just metal but leverage. For months, Helen had dictated when and how he could access his own land. Now, with one twist of this key, all that power shifted. They left through the back door, careful not to draw attention. Frank clapped him on the shoulder. "Congratulations. You just bought yourself a gate and a fight." Back at the ranch, Alex parked by the road and walked the last 50 yards to the lot. The gate stood there, the same as always, but it looked different now. It was no longer an obstacle. It was his. He slid the key into the padlock, turned smoothly, and the shackle popped open. The sound was sharper than he expected. Final, almost like a door closing behind him. He swung the gate wide and stepped back, letting the cattle in the nearest pasture wander toward the creek for the first time in weeks. He felt a sense of control returning. That feeling lasted exactly 2 days. On the third morning, a white SUV pulled up and stopped in front of the gate. Helen stepped out, heels clicking on the gravel, clipboard in hand. 2 other board members got out as well. "Mr. Turner," she said, her voice cool. "You appear to have accessed association property without authorization." Alex leaned on the gate. "This isn't association property anymore. I own this lot. You can check the county records if you don't believe me." Her eyes narrowed. "That's impossible. The association had first right of refusal." "Maybe they did," he said evenly, "but they didn't use it. The seller took my offer. Now this gate is mine, and I've got the paperwork to prove it." One of the board members shifted uncomfortably. "Helen, if that's true." She cut him off. "We'll see about that." Turning back to Alex, she added, "Don't think for a second this is over. We'll challenge it." Alex didn't flinch. "Challenge whatever you want. In the meantime, you don't control this access anymore." "I do." They left without another word, but Alex could feel the tension in the air. By that afternoon, he'd received 3 separate emails from the association demanding immediate clarification of the gate status. He forwarded each one to Tom, who replied simply, "Let them make the next move." Over the next week, word spread fast. Neighbors he barely knew stopped him at the feed store or waved him down on the road. Some congratulated him quietly, like they didn't want anyone else to hear. Others warned him that the board was looking for ways to make an example out of him. Glenn stopped by one evening and found Alex sitting on the porch, boots propped on the rail. "Looks like you lit a fire," Glenn said. Alex took a sip of his coffee. "Good. Maybe it's about time this place stopped being afraid of Helen." But what Alex didn't realize was that taking control of the gate was just the first round. The real fight was about to get ugly, and it would drag the entire neighborhood into the middle of it. It didn't take long for the association to go on the offensive. 2 days after Helen's visit to the gate, Alex received a certified letter claiming that his ownership of the lot may constitute an encroachment on association rights, and demanding that he cease any alteration to the property until a legal review is completed. He walked the letter over to Glenn's place that evening. Glenn read it, then laughed out loud. They're bluffing. If they thought they had a real claim, they'd already be in court. Alex shrugged. Bluff or not, they're not backing down. The tension reached a new level that Saturday. Alex was hauling a load of feed into the ranch when he saw Helen standing at the gate with two uniformed sheriff's deputies. The blue and gold decals on their trucks glinted in the sunlight as Alex slowed his truck and rolled down the window. One deputy stepped forward. Mr. Turner, we got a call about a property dispute. We're here to keep the peace. Alex climbed out, holding his paperwork in one hand. Deputies, this is my land. This lot, this gate. It's all on the deed. Bought it fair and square. Helen crossed her arms. That property has always been under association management. He's interfering with community access. Alex handed one of the deputies a copy of the recorded deed. The deputy looked it over, nodding slowly. It checks out. He owns it. Helen's jaw tightened. We'll take this to court. That's your right, ma'am, the deputy said. But for now, there's no law being broken here. They left soon after, but the scene had drawn a small crowd of neighbors. Alex could hear snippets of conversation, some in support, others siding with Helen. The division was becoming impossible to ignore. That night, Alex's phone buzzed with a text from Paula Green. Be careful. They're holding an emergency board meeting Monday. Word is they're pushing for new rules that could hit you hard. Monday came and Alex showed up to the meeting early. The room was packed, tension thick enough to taste. Helen wasted no time. As many of you know, she began. Recent events have highlighted gaps in our ability to maintain community standards. The board is proposing an amendment granting the association authority over any access points that serve more than one property. Alex raised his hand. That's a pretty convenient amendment, considering you're targeting one specific owner, me. This isn't about you, Mr. Turner, she replied, though her eyes didn't leave his. It's about the community as a whole. The back and forth was sharp and heated. Alex pointed out that the amendment would give the association sweeping powers over land it didn't own. Helen countered with vague claims about security and consistency. When the vote was called, the board split, 3 in favor, 2 against. But the amendment still needed a majority of homeowner votes to pass. After the meeting, several neighbors pulled Alex aside. One, a wiry man named Mr. Frank Delgado, spoke in a low voice. You're not the first person she's tried to steamroll, but you might be the first who can beat her. Keep going. By midweek, the fight had spilled onto social media. A local community page lit up with posts about the gate, the association, and whether Helen had gone too far. Alex kept his own posts measured, sticking to facts and sharing copies of public records. But the comment sections told the real story. Neighbors were picking sides like it was a small-town election. Then came the strangest twist yet. Glenn showed up one evening holding a plain envelope. Inside was an anonymous note. Check the county clerk's filings tomorrow. Alex did just that. What he found made his stomach drop. Helen had filed a notice of intent to purchase an adjacent strip of land that ran alongside his fence. If she got it, she could create an alternate access route and cut his leverage in half. But if she thought that would scare him, she was about to learn that Alex had no intention of giving up an inch, not after coming this far. The day after Alex learned about Helen's filing, he headed straight to Tom Baird's office. The lawyer was leaning back in his chair when Alex came in, the morning light slanting across a desk cluttered with case files. She's trying to box me in again, Alex said, dropping the printed notice on the desk. If she gets that strip, she can bypass my gate completely. Tom read it over, then nodded slowly. It's a clever move. I'll give her that. But it's not a done deal. That land is county-owned for now, and it's earmarked for possible utility access. She'll have to jump through a lot of hoops to get it. We can slow her down, file an objection, request a review of the sale process. Maybe even lobby the county to keep it public. Do it, Alex said. I'll pay whatever it costs. Tom got to work immediately, but outside the legal arena, things were heating up fast. The local paper ran a front-page story, Rancher Battles Association over Locked Gate. The article was fairly neutral, but the accompanying photo, Alex leaning on the gate, arms crossed, gave the impression of a man standing his ground. The next morning at the feed store, people he barely knew came up to shake his hand. "Saw you in the paper," one older man said. About time someone stood up to them. Not everyone was on his side. At the grocery store, a woman in a neighborhood association volunteer badge muttered, "You're making this harder for all of us," as she passed him in the aisle. Alex didn't bother responding. By the end of the week, the story had been picked up by a local talk radio show. Callers debated the situation for nearly an hour, some arguing property rights, others siding with the association's need for order. Alex listened from his truck, surprised at how quickly his private battle had turned into a public one. Then came the community barbecue. It was an annual event at the town park, usually a chance for neighbors to relax and gossip over smoked brisket and sweet tea. This year, it felt more like a political rally. Clusters of people gathered under the shade trees, some openly wearing Turner's Right pins that Glenn had apparently handed out. Alex kept to the edge, plate in hand, but he couldn't avoid Helen forever. She approached with two board members, her smile tight. "Mr. Turner," she said, "enjoying the event?" "Not as much as I'd enjoy having my time back instead of dealing with all this," he replied evenly. Her smile didn't falter. "You've made your point, but the association will continue to enforce its rules. You'd be wise to consider the long-term consequences of this publicity." Alex looked her dead in the eye. "You've been using fear to get your way for years. That stops now." The conversation drew the attention of those nearby. A few people stopped talking to watch. Helen noticed and shifted her tone, pretending to be conciliatory. "We can still work this out without dragging it through the courts." "You had that chance months ago," Alex said. "You chose the lock instead." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the concrete path. Later that night, Paula called him. "You know she's furious, right? She's lost control of the narrative. People aren't afraid to speak up anymore." Alex leaned back in his chair. "Good. Maybe that's the real win here." Still, he knew this wasn't over. Helen was too invested to walk away without trying something drastic. And sure enough, 2 days later, Tom called with news. Helen had filed a lawsuit challenging his ownership of the gate lot, claiming procedural irregularities in the sale. But instead of feeling intimidated, Alex felt something else entirely. A resolve that was stronger than it had been at any point in this fight. Now he wasn't just defending his land. He was defending every neighbor who'd been steamrolled by the association and never fought back. The summons arrived on a Friday afternoon, a thick packet delivered by a deputy who gave Alex a sympathetic look. "Guess you knew this was coming," the deputy said. Alex just nodded. "Yeah, I was expecting it." Inside, the language was dense. Pages of legal arguments about easements, covenants, and undue influence on the sale process. But underneath all the jargon, Alex saw what it really was. A last-ditch attempt to claw back control. Tom met with him the next morning. "They've got nothing solid," the lawyer said, flipping through the paperwork. "The sale was clean. The title's clear. They're hoping you'll get tired of the fight and settle." Alex shook his head. "I'm not settling." Over the next few weeks, the case worked its way through the county court. Each hearing drew a mix of curious locals, supportive neighbors, and a few association loyalists who sat in the back with crossed arms. Alex noticed Helen always arrived early, immaculately dressed, flanked by her bored allies. She didn't acknowledge him once. During one break in the proceedings, Paula approached him in the hallway. "Win or lose," she said, "you've already changed things here. People are standing up more. They're questioning the rules instead of just signing the checks." Alex appreciated the words, but he wasn't interested in moral victories. He wanted a real one. That victory came on a bright Tuesday morning in early summer. The judge ruled that the purchase was valid, the title stood, and the association had no legal authority over the lot or the gate. Alex could keep his property, and the association was ordered to pay his legal fees. When the gavel came down, a low murmur filled the courtroom. Glenn grinned from the second row, giving Alex a subtle thumbs up. Paula beamed. Even a few people who'd been silent before came over to shake his hand. Outside on the courthouse steps, reporters waited with cameras and microphones. Alex kept his comments brief. "This was never about offense," he said. "It was about the principle that you don't let someone take what's yours just because they think they can. I hope this encourages others to stand their ground." Back at the ranch, he drove out to the gate. The cattle were grazing near the creek, the water glinting in the sunlight. He leaned against the post, feeling the breeze on his face. For the first time in months, there was no weight on his shoulders, no locked gate standing between him and his land. Glenn joined him a few minutes later, 2 bottles of cold beer in hand. "Feels good, doesn't it?" he said. Alex smiled. "It's more than that. It's knowing that if you stand up once, you might give other people the courage to do the same." They sat in the shade, talking about the herd, the weather, and what might come next. Alex knew the association wouldn't vanish, and Helen would probably still try to make things difficult in smaller ways. But she'd learned that intimidation had limits, and he'd learned that persistence backed by the truth could win. Weeks later, Alex noticed something small but meaningful. The tone of the association meetings had shifted. Board members spoke more carefully. Neighbors raised questions without looking over their shoulders. The fear that had hung over the community for years had cracked, and that, Alex thought, was the real win. If there was one lesson in all of it, it was simple. The moment you stop letting someone else write the rules for your life, you start living on your own terms. So if you're listening to this and you've got your own locked gate, whatever it might be, don't assume you have to accept it. Ask questions, push back, and if the fight is worth it, don't stop until you've turned that lock with your own key. Subscribe for more real stories that remind you your voice matters, your rights matter, and no one can fence in your life unless you let them.